So Politico it's our first week to try and really, be a publication on European politics and policy that you all will feel that you have to read, but also want to read. Now, that has been the case for the last 8 years in the U.S., and we are going to also bring you coverage of American politics, which is most relevant for here. You may have heard there's a campaign, it always starts in America 2 years ahead of time, that's beginning, and I think we have some great insights here from Mike Allen, who's the original writer of Playbook in the U.S., and John Harris, who is the editor-in-chief and co-founder.
Mike, those were some very, very funny Germans that we just had up. That's going to put the challenge for us. I was hoping we would be the funny ones, as in the Americans, our work is set out for us.
Well, we certainly can be well hydrated because nobody before us has drank any water, so it's all left here for us.
All right. The presidential campaign's underway. Size it up. As Matt said, we're still a couple years away, but it's beginning in earnest as much as it has in recent cycles.
Yeah, well, John Harris, I'll plunge right into that. But first, I want to take a second to say what a privilege and how much fun it's been to be here this week as our European colleagues launched Politico.eu. It's been so exciting to see this great international staff that Matt and Carrie have built, staff of 95, 36 journalists, including 20 nationalities, 14 languages, 4 continents, all in one room. And we thank all of you out there. We discovered Twitter's very big in Brussels. We thank all of you for tweeting about us all week and for coming out for this great event. I also thank Google and Urid for making these amazing conversations possible. The U.S. race. So our MD, Scheherazade Semzar, was saying that her mother sent her an email on launch night that said, "Why are all the stories about Hillary Clinton?" And she said, "Mom, you must be on Politico.com. You want Politico.eu." So we're going to take a quick plunge to Politico.com here. And John, something that is defining this race so far, we were talking earlier about the economy stupid. Something that we're seeing is that because all these Republicans have to run against Hillary Clinton, and they all start way behind the 8 ball at a time when foreign policy, national security is top of mind for voters. None of these Republicans, unless you count Jeb Bush getting his foreign policy experience by osmosis from dad and brother, and just guessing he's not going to be saying a lot about his brother during this campaign, none of the big Republicans have national security cred, which is something that they have to scramble for. So you saw on Politico.eu the other day that Jeb Bush is going to be coming over here, making stops in Germany, Estonia as part of that process.
You know, that's really a shift, because if we look back, say a decade ago or certainly a generation ago, Republicans always had a big advantage when it came to national security.
Yeah, remember Mike Dukakis in the tank? It started there.
That's right. And I do think that is still a legacy. Even as President Obama is finishing up his term, he's in the, as you said, the 4th quarter, the legacy of the Bush years, his unpopularity, I would say, here in Europe, from what I know, and certainly the toxicity of that name is still a big factor. It might be that President Bush had squandered that Republican advantage on national security, on diplomacy, for a generation.
No, that's one of the very interesting questions about the Jeb Bush candidacy. I think that a lot of people in the U.S. at this moment would say they assume that it's going to come down to Hillary Clinton versus Jeb Bush. And if that becomes the case, and maybe even before that, maybe even during the Republican primaries, we're going to see a very fascinating experiment. It is possible that Jeb Bush has the ultimate design flaw, and that is that someone with the last name Bush just cannot win at this moment. Now, he's gambling that he's going to be thought of more as Jeb than as Bush, but we don't know that. And so I think sitting here, John, we would say if Hillary Clinton is president, it'll be why. The big reason, one of the big reasons is likely to be the real politician in her family, who's going to have some say in how that campaign is run. The fact that she does have world experience, global experience, at a time that really matters to voters. And what Republicans will say is, if she doesn't win, it's partly because of that. They are going to try to take decisions that Obama has made and turn those against her. And that's why we're going to have like this fascinating exercise in coming months that's going to be a no-win both for the White House and for Hillary. We're constantly going to be trying to gauge, is Obama hugging her? Is Obama pulling back? Vice versa. He's never going to be able to pull away from her or vice versa, but we're going to be watching the microns on that.
Well, Mike, I've got this nightmare vision of my future as a political reporter. The year is 2040. I'm approaching
You're writing
80
about
years
Charlotte
old.
Clinton.
And Chelsea Clinton versus George P. Bush the 10th, or whatever we're up to at that point. I'd be curious. I was recently before a group. It was a German group, but I'll ask this group. It's multinational. We're all addicted to polls as American journalists. Let's do a quick poll here. Show of hands.
This is unscientific. Those of you who are tweeting.
How many people think the prospect of a Hillary versus Jeb race is a sign of something reassuring, something familiar, something healthy about American politics? And how many people think it's something weird about American politics? And yet, for basically 2 generations running, these 2 families, these 2 dynasties have ruled what's we think of ourselves as the world's first and greatest democracy.
All right.
So
Reassuring first.
Hands up. And
Weird.
Kind of weird. I think we have a winner. The exit polls came.
No, I think the weirds. I think the weirds have it. So, what are some of the hurdles for Secretary Clinton? Because we can agree that the Bush name is something that's probably not helpful to Jeb Bush if he winds up being her opponent. A big hurdle for her, John, and you covered the first Clinton, and so you know this. It's a real rarity in American politics. It's only happened one time in our lifetime, even in our lifetime, for the same party to win the White House 3 terms in a row. It happened Reagan, Bush, and then the dad lost. It's the exception that almost proves the rule. There's never been another time in our lifetime. And so for Hillary Clinton to be a candidate of the future, to have the race not be about what's gone on before, is going to be very difficult for her. And this was framed by none other than the mastermind of President Obama's political rise, and that was David Axelrod, his Karl Rove. And David Axelrod, Axe is just out with a book where he revisits a memo that he wrote to then Senator Obama, then freshman Senator Obama, when he was contemplating running against Hillary Clinton over that Thanksgiving and Christmas. And in the memo that he wrote for his boss, Senator Obama, he said 2 things about Hillary Clinton. One, it will be very difficult for her to be a fresh face, to not be about the past. And second, he wrote, she is not a healing figure. So we're 10 years later, and neither of those things is more true.
I think that's right. I don't think there's any question that Hillary Clinton very, very much wants to be president. I think the only problem with that is she really, really doesn't want to run for president. This is a campaign that, at least so far, has shown sort of no joy, no exuberance, none of the feeling of ascendancy that you got with Barack Obama's campaign in 2008. It's not just a function of age. Ronald Reagan in 1980 had that, a sense that history and a personality were coming together in a convergence. So far, this feels like a very dutiful campaign, a sort of a paint-by-numbers campaign.
No, that's a great point, and we saw a great illustration of this just a couple months ago in Iowa. They were out there for a steak fry, and believe it or not, like steak frying is not a big deal in America, but it is at this particular political gathering in Iowa. And there's a tradition there that it's a couple thousand people, so that's a lot of steaks to fry. And so they obviously do them on these huge grills, and this is one of those little quirks of political photo ops everywhere. They do a photo op of whoever the honored politician is, of slapping a couple of steaks on a grill that looks like the Weber in your yard. So Hillary Clinton came out and she flipped her one steak and then went back in a barn to hang out while her husband, President Clinton, hung out and talked to the reporters and talked to the people who were nearby and just soaked it up. And it's what Johnny was referring to, the love of the game. Somebody who has the love of the game, who loves being out there, is Joe Biden. He loves plunging in, and it's led to some pretty awkward moments between him and his boss. I think that President Obama likes Joe Biden best when he's on the road and far from him. Some ministers were telling me about an event a couple of months ago in the Oval Office. President Obama had brought in ministers from across the spectrum to talk about immigration, and he was trying to enlist them in pushing some sort of immigration reform. And the president said what he was saying, and Joe Biden started being very Joe Biden, talking about something that didn't particularly have anything to do with the topic at hand. And the ministers told me that the president didn't quite roll his eyes, but you looked at his face and he was basically saying, "Welcome to my world." And yet Biden loves being out on the trail, loves being out on the road. Secretary Clinton out in her Scoopy van, driving around Iowa and then flying first class back to Washington. It's going to be a long campaign for her and for us.
I agree with that. Back on this, the dynasty, here's something for the audience to ponder, though. If it's not just the Clinton dynasty that's had this amazing staying power. The last time a Republican presidential ticket won the presidency in America without somebody named Bush on it. Can anybody get that? When was it? 1972. Nixon and Agnew was the last time you had Republicans take the White House without somebody named Bush on it. And that's why I tend to think, even as toxic as George W. Bush's presidency is, that Jeb Bush, if he can surmount the nomination battle, is going to be well positioned to really give her a tough race in a general election context. That's a big, big if. So far, he is not setting Republicans on fire. Only one class of Republicans is really excited about Jeb Bush, and that is fundraisers.
Rich ones.
Rich Republicans, which is, that's a start with the Republican Party. That gets you about halfway there. The rest of the party clearly is not with the program. We do a weekly poll of Iowa political activists, and Bush is not the choice there.
No, that's right, but you're going to play your history games, Mr. Smarty Pants. I have one for you, and that is going back at least until Reagan. There has not been a single time that a Republican cornered the market on establishment money, endorsement, and buzz, and did not become the Republican nominee. So you had Reagan twice, you had Bush twice, you had Romney, you had McCain, you had Dole. And so Jeb Bush looks to be in a very good position. You're right, it hasn't been tried out on the road yet. And there's a expression in American politics, I'm not sure how well this translates, but when a politician does very well in the media, does very well with donors, but they don't do so well on the road, we refer to it as the dogs aren't eating the dog food. And we don't yet know if the dogs will eat the dog food when it comes to Jeb Bush. That's why Marco Rubio, the Republican from Florida, Cuban parents, is looking very strong right now. Some of the big check writers in America, you maybe saw Scheherazad's mother saw this morning on Politico.com, that the big check writers in America are looking like they might want to back him, which would make a big difference. His last name isn't Bush. He has a great personal story. He's from Florida. He's young, of early 40s, which there's a debate about whether that helps or hurts, but he's another person who's in a very good position, and he's in the best position of all to be the vice president as long as the nominee is not Jeb Bush. Because some of you may remember a quirk in the U.S. Constitution: the president and the vice president ticket can't both be from the same state. So some of you remember that's why Dick Cheney, after he picked himself to be George W. Bush's vice president, sneaked off to Wyoming to change his registration from Texas, because they couldn't have both been on the ticket as Texans.
Mike, we need to finish up, but I'm going to make a prediction here. And since Florian said we're here to stay out, so we'll be back here in Brussels. If our prediction is wrong, we'll hear it from this audience. But my prediction is this: we have seen the last presidential ticket ever in American politics that features two white men. That will never happen again. The country has grown so much more diverse that no party, not the Republicans, not the Democrats, would ever go before voters putting two white men on the ticket.
No, and that's why there just aren't enough of them. Romney got every last one, and it's not enough. And that's why you're right, that for Republicans, they face a math problem, that they still have a real demographic hole. They have a real data hole compared to the sophistication of the Obama operation. And a dilemma for Republicans: if we had had this panel the day after Mitt Romney lost, the day after the last election day, we would have all been able to agree what Republicans needed to do. They needed to do something about immigration. They needed a new message on marriage to reach young people. They needed a new way to reach minorities, and they needed to improve their deficiency on data. Not a single one of those things has been accomplished.
Good. Mike, thanks so much. Why don't we finish up?
Thank all of you for coming out to this great event. I'm going to hand the baton back to Matt for a second. But I just want to thank all of you for supporting EU and congratulate my Brussels colleagues on the amazing week, a fantastic website, a great print edition of the paper, and this BAFO event. Thank all of you so much.
Great. Thank you.